It was just another routine flight for the crew of Delta Flight 485. As they prepared for takeoff from Atlanta to Boston, the pilot, Captain Eddie, a veteran pilot with over 20 years of experience, was confident in his aircraft and his crew. First Officer David was sharp and attentive, and their flight attendant, Sarah, was a calming presence who knew the flight routine like the back of her hand. They were ready for a smooth flight. As the plane soared through the skies, the crew carried on with their tasks. But their calm was shattered when a horrifying sound pierced the air. A loud bang, followed by an unsettling shudder, shook the plane. Alarms blared, bathing the cockpit in red light, indicating a critical engine failure. Chaos erupted in the cabin. Panicked screams filled the air as the reality of their fate smacked them squarely in the face. But amidst the pandemonium, the crew remained steadfast. Captain Eddie immediately contacted air traffic control, his voice betraying none of the turmoil he felt within. He needed to land this plane, and he needed to do it fast. But where? The nearest airport was still miles away, and their options were dwindling fast. In the midst of the crisis, a chilling thought struck him. Their best chance lay in an abandoned airstrip they'd passed over just minutes ago. It was a long shot, but it was their only one. He radioed the control tower, Delta 485 to Atlanta. "We're diverting to the emergency landing strip at Juliet." The urgency in his voice left no room for misinterpretation. As the plane hurtled towards the abandoned airstrip, the crew's anxiety mounted. They were gambling on a miracle, hoping the single runway would be clear and their battered plane would hold together long enough to make it. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, the passengers were a sea of terrified faces. The initial shock had worn off, leaving behind a gnawing fear of the unknown. Every bump and shudder of the plane sent fresh shivers down their spines. But then something remarkable happened. A woman in the middle of the cabin stood up. Her name was Maria, a seasoned traveler known for her level-headedness. Now, in the face of impending doom, she was taking charge. She began distributing life jackets, her voice ringing with authority. "Everyone stay calm and put your life jackets on," she instructed. "We may need to land in a body of water, so we have to be prepared." Her words, though laced with authority, were also reassuring. As she moved through the cabin, checking on passengers, she noticed a young girl crying. Kneeling down, she offered words of comfort. In that moment of shared vulnerability, the mother-daughter bond transcended the chaos around them. Back in the cockpit, Captain Eddie was wrestling with the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. The abandoned airstrip was in sight, but the reality of landing on a rough terrain, not to mention without a functional engine, was daunting. The wind snatched at the plane, threatening to send it off course. Sweat beaded on Eddie's forehead as he fought to keep the plane on target. As the plane touched down, a collective gasp went through the cabin. It was so rough that several people thought they were going to die. But miraculously, the plane stayed on the runway, even if it was only by a nose. Cheers erupted. They had made it, but the ordeal was far from over. Emergency landing had taken a heavy toll on the plane. Now, they needed to get themselves out of this situation before things took a turn for the worse. That's when they heard a voice. "Does anyone speak English?" A man had emerged from the trees, his eyes wide with surprise. Relief washed over the passengers. Help was here. As the passengers filed out of the plane, their faces etched with relief, they saw the source of the cheers. It was the locals who had witnessed their harrowing landing. They rushed to help, their kindness a stark contrast to the terror they'd just experienced. News of the emergency landing spread like wildfire, bringing the world's attention to the small town of Juliet. The local hospital, already packed with patients, had sprung into action. Doctors, nurses, and medical staff dropped everything, readying themselves for a potential influx of casualties. But the nightmare scenario didn't materialize. The passengers, shaken but remarkably intact, refused medical attention. They were more concerned about the fate of the pilots and the flight attendant. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the runway, a somber hush fell over the crowd. They waited anxiously for word from the hospital. The pilots and the flight attendant were heroes, but now they needed help themselves. Then it came, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. The doctors emerged, their faces etched with fatigue, but their voices firm. We're sorry to say this, but the pilots and the flight attendant, they didn't make it. Their words hung in the air, heavy with finality. A wave of grief swept through the crowd. They mourned not just for the fallen crew, but for the close call they'd all shared. Yet in the midst of the tragedy, one woman's actions shone through. Maria, the unsung hero, had used her life vest to help others, ensuring many survived. Her simple act of kindness saved countless lives, making her a local hero. The next morning, Juliet awoke to a transformed landscape. The once deserted airstrip was now a sea of activity. Emergency services personnel were there, but so were locals offering their support. And at the center of it all was Maria. Reporters and photographers crowded around her, eager to capture her story. But she remained humble, deflecting praise and sharing the spotlight with the other passengers. The news of the crash and its aftermath reverberated around the world, carrying with it tales of bravery, loss, and unwavering human spirit. People were shocked, saddened, and inspired by the events that unfolded in Juliet. They wondered how they would have handled such a terrifying situation. But through it all, one thing became clear. The actions of one woman had made a world of difference. Her selflessness had saved countless lives. And as the world grappled with the tragedy of the crash, they also celebrated the heroism that had emerged from the ashes.